name's Stonesy Boy, and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today it's a relatively short episode, with it being 61 to 76. So, without further ado, let's begin. Ralph fell back out of the cabin. Bob quietly closed and locked the window. Realizing he was breathing loudly, he took a few seconds to get control of himself, blowing out a long muted breath. He was pleased when he no longer sounded like a train engine. How could Ralph be bleeding? If Ralph was a guy in a suit, why would he be willing to get injured to pull off a prank? Up until now, Bob's logical brain had been trying to tell him the effort was expecting to keep Ralph out of the cabin beyond preposterous. Whoever was wearing or running Ralph was being persistent. Yes, but it was probably just some part of outrageous joke. Patina's staff played on anyone with the audacity to try to stop the bunny call. Some sense in urgency, with his conviction that he was battling a truly dangerous foe, was more than likely all in his head. But a bleeding Ralph could put a serious crimp in Bob's theory. What if Ralph really did want to get inside the cabin and hurt Bob and his family? Maybe Bob was losing his mind, but then again, maybe not. The door on the left side of the cabin started to slide open. Bob moaned. He'd forgotten. Wanda had opened that window. Bob charged over the window just as Ralph's bleeding orange paw began reaching through the opening. Bob slapped the window closed, catching an intruding paw, and the paw bled more heavily, and it moved, reaching Bob and snatched up the tackle box hidden under the window and slammed the paw into the box. The contents of the box scattered and the noise made Bob pause. The paw curled back toward the window, and Bob opened the window just enough to thrust the paw back outside in the end of the tackle box. He pushed the window closed and locked it. Bob shined his penlight around the cabin again. What would Ralph do next? Come on, think, Bob admonished itself. Thinking, though, it was a bad idea. If he thought he would have to face the fact that it really was Ralph, very determined Ralph, willing to bleed to reach his goal, trying to get in the cabin, what else would he want? Bob certainly did not want to think about that. Right now, every one of his instincts was telling him to keep Ralph out of any cost. It was going beyond trying to stop Ralph from scaring his wife and kids. This is about stopping Ralph, period. Bob would have explained what was going on, even if someone had put a gun to his head and demanded he explain himself. But he just knew that there would be horrible consequences if Ralph did get inside of the cabin. Bob tilted his head and listened. He realized that he had no idea where Ralph was. Was Ralph still outside? Was his window, or had he moved into a different one? Bob had perfectly still again and listened some more. At first, he heard nothing. He checked his watch. It was 5:43, 17 minutes to go, Bob whispered. And one more window Ralph would get through. Why was Bob just standing there? Outside, a rhythmic shuffling moved past the cabin door. Shift, poof, shift, poof, shift, poof. The sound was moving away from Bob. Ralph was heading toward another window, the one right next to the double bed where Wanda slept. Bob knew he was sure to get the next window was locked, but he was rooted to the floor. Shift, poof, shift, poof, shift, poof, shift, poof. Ralph was almost to the edge of the front porch without to turn the corner. Bob moved. He ran through the cabin as lightly as he could, passing his sleeping wife and daughter. Just as he reached the window, it started to move. Bob grated the edge of the window and tried to close it. Ralph kept trying to open it. Bob stuffed his penlight through his pocket and used both hands to force the window closed. He concentrated on keeping his breathing even and shallow. He didn't even let himself grunt and groan in exertion. He just pushed the window closed while Ralph pushed the window open. Stalemate. How long did Bob stand there and straining and close the window? It felt like hours, maybe days. Bob's muscles began to spasm. It felt like biceps were filled with a liquid fire spreading upward in his shoulders. He wanted to scream in pain and frustration. Bob, outside, faint pre-dawn light was pushing away through the blackness. Bob could make out Ralph's gargantuan head and ears. Bob was just inches from the adversary. Only a window glass separated them. Window glass and Bob's determination to protect his family. Bob closed his eyes and gave the effort everything he had. Suddenly, the window slid shut, the snick of it wrenching into place, seeming impossibly loud. Wanda stirred, but she didn't wake up. Weakly, Bob locked the window. Then, he dropped his arms and shook them out. He felt like they turned into a pair of Cindy's flimsy jump ropes. Stepping away from his beds, Bob wiped the seat covering his face. He felt a ludicrous sense of accomplishment. A bump in the clatter came from underneath the cabin. Ralph had moved on. Bob pulled out his penlight from his pocket and aimed for the floor. The trap door! Bob ran over the trapdoor and stood on it. He immediately felt like an imbecile. His weight alone wasn't going to be enough to keep the trapdoor closed. At least, not if he was standing. Ralph could easily throw Bob off of balance by opening it. Would sitting on the trapdoor work? Bob sat down on the door. He listened to the bumps under the door. Growing ever closer, the closer they came, the more Bob thought about how big Ralph was. Bob wasn't a tiny guy, but he was pretty sure whoever was in Ralph's suit was strong enough to dislodge Bob from the trapdoor. And then what? What would he do now? He looked around, grasping the solution. His gaze landed on a chest of drawers. Jumping up and running across the chest, he gave it a tentative shove. It was heavy, but it slid easily. The only problem was the sliding around was noisy. Cindy snores paused a second, then restarted. Bob's gaze darted around the cabin. Think, think, think. He spotted the quilt lying folded up in the end of the trundle bed. He mentally thanked Cindy for playing with it. If he hadn't, he probably would have noticed it. Grabbing the quilt, he lay on the ground. Another bump and a scuffle from under the cabin. Ralpho was almost to the trap door. Bob tilted the chest toward him, so it leaned on its side. He let it all the way down to the floor on the top of the quilt. Then he bent over, grabbing the edge of the quilt, and he started dragging the chest toward the trap door as fast as he could. The trap door started to open. Bob jumped on the door. He closed with a snap that made Bob wince, but he snorting around him continued. He leaned back over, grabbing the quilt's edges, hauling the chest toward him as fast as he could. The trapdoor started to rise under his feet again. Quickly, he backed off of it and pulled the chest onto the door. Then he turned the chest onto its back. He sat on it. The chest started to buck, and Bob felt like he was on some silent, malevolent amusement park ride. It was a combined weight of Bob and the chest of drawers going to be enough. The chest buckled again, and Bob was nearly thrown off. He gripped both sides of the chest and hung on. Bob had never ridden a bull or a mechanical bull, and he wondered if this was like this. His head kept getting yanked around, and he'd have whiplash soon if Ralpho didn't stop, but Ralpho did stop. Scuffling sounds in the cabin moved away from the trapdoor and outside wall. Bob slumped on the chest. Now, was it over? Bob checked his watch. It was 5:56. 4 minutes. Just 4 minutes. Bob listened closer to the swishing and tapping sounds under the cabin. Ralpho was almost out from under the building. His whole family was still snoring. The Wanda shifted in bed. All any kind of kids would wake up soon, and Bob didn't want to leave the chest lying in the middle of the floor. Another few seconds of listening, Bob convinced himself Ralpho was no longer under the cabin. So he quickly pulled the chest back in the wall, rightened it. He made a half-hearted attempt to fold the quilt and dropped it in the end of the bed. Then Bob thought about Ralpho's bleeding paws. Did any blood get inside the cabin, like on the tennis racket or tackle box? Bob decided he didn't want to look. Instead, he trotted to the fridge and pulled off some paper towels and a roll Wanda had put on top. He quickly wiped down both tennis racket and tackle box. Plus, he wiped down the windows and the floor beneath each one. Now, wanting very much to climb into bed himself, Bob waited. His instincts were telling him he needed to stay alert. But why? The cabin was secure. Ralpho was retreating. A sudden rap drugged against the back of the cabin. The back of the cabin? What was Ralpho doing there? Nothing was back there. No, wait, the loft window. Bob's stomach and heart switched places. He forgot all about the loft window. Clamping his pen light to his teeth, Bob climbed the ladder up to the loft as fast as he could. Even though every step raised the dread meter higher, he only didn't want to climb up to the loft at all. If Ralpho was up there, Bob didn't know he already could handle it. But he had to. After all, his boys were also in the loft. When Bob had reached the top of the ladder, he hesitated. Then he took a deep, shaky breath. He shined a light at the window in the far wall and peered up into the loft. Bob's light revealed upper half of Ralpho already through the window. Bob let out a choked cry. Thankfully, the astonishment cut off at the sound of the throat, and his boy snored on. Gaping at Ralpho, Bob momentarily paralyzed. His situation was so far beyond anything his mind could process. He felt utterly and thoroughly shut down. All Bob could do was stare. But he had to move. He had to keep Ralpho away from his family. Why did he just keep gawking? And suddenly Ralpho paused in his climb through the window. He gazed back to Bob, and neither of them made a sound. Bob trembled and clutched his loft ladder so hard his hands throbbed. Outside, a dog arrived, and the light shined through Ralpho's orange head, making him look for an instant like some sort of supernova monster. Bob was super glued to the ladder. He listened to his own uneven breathing, and Ralpho began backing out of the window. Ralpho retreated completely from the cabin. His head dropped below the level of the window. Then, silence. Silence all around. Bob closed his eyes, dropped his head to the top step of the loft ladder. Dad? Abruptly, the cabin was filled with an intense white light. The luminous instruction of the consciousness felt so invasive that Bob blinked several times and tried to figure out where he was. It felt like he had been transported to another otherworldly place. Bob squinted. He recognized the wide-eyed face of his sleep-rumpled son. "What are you doing?" Aaron asked. He stood underneath a pull-up string and exposed light bulb that now lit up the loft. Everything cascaded back into place. The bunny call, Ralpho, Bob's frenzied determination stopped the threat in his family. "What time is it?" Bob asked. "Huh? The time." Aaron picked up his cell phone from his nightstand. Really, the only function their phones had out here was a clock. "It's 6, Aaron said. Tears filled Bob's eyes. "Dad?" Aaron repeated. "What are you doing?" Bob ignored him. Now Tyler was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. "Mama up?" Cindy's high-pitched voice demanded down below the loft. "Dad, why are you hanging on to the ladder?" Tyler asked. He threw back his covers and shifted the edge of the bed. Bob didn't know how he could move. He felt like all his muscle had left his body, but he couldn't say where he was. He didn't have the strength. So up or down? Up was closer. Bob climbed the rest of the way into the loft. Without answering Tyler's question, because he didn't know how to answer it, Bob collapsed next to Tyler. He motioned for Aaron to join him. Looking at his father as if he'd grown a second head, Aaron was slowly crossed to Tyler's bed. Bob had his face next to his hip, and Aaron frowned but sat down. Tyler and Aaron exchanged a look. Then Bob reached around the back of the boys' necks and pulled them both close. He dropped his arms around their shoulders, and then he squeezed them a long, tight hug. He wanted to say something. He was too emotional to talk. He just wanted to hold on to his boys, his precious boys, for as long as, "Dad, you're kind of squeezing the life out of us," Tyler said. Bob let up the hug, but didn't let them go. He cleared his throat and got his voice to work. "I love you guys," he said, "so much." He looked at both of them in turn. Both boys had creases on their cheeks from their night's sleep. Their eyes were crusty, and they had sour morning breath. Bob didn't care. They were his sons. They were perfect. "You know how much I love you, right?" he asked them. Tyler and Aaron looked at each other again. Yeah," Aaron said. "Yeah," Tyler agreed. "We love you too, Dad," Aaron said. A click came from the cabin's first floor, and more light blasted through the little building. Wanda was up. "Bob, what are you doing up there?" Wanda's scratchy early morning voice sounded wonderfully normal. "Come on, boys," Bob said. The boys didn't move when Bob got up, but Bob grinned at them before heading down the ladder. What a wonderful morning. It was great to be alive. At the bottom of the ladder, Bob turned toward the double bed and scooped up the daughter from it. "Cindy Lee, my buzzy honeybee," he exclaimed before buzzing in her little ear. Cindy immediately began giggling hysterically. Then he put her arms straight out on her sides and instructed, "Fly, Daddy, fly." Bob happily picked her up and ran her around the room with her yelling, "Zoom goes the buzzy honeybee. Zoom, zoom, buzz, buzz. Zoom, zoom, buzz, buzz," Cindy repeated. And then he let loose a high-pitched squeal of glee. "Bob," Wanda said, and then standing in the bed in bright yellow silk pajamas, her hands on her hip. "What?" he asked. "Something weird's going on." "What makes you say that?" Wanda frowned. "I have no idea." She shook her head. "I must have been having a strange dream." Cindy squealed again. Wanda looked at her daughter, and Bob, her mouth dropped open, her eyes widened. A bright light in the cabin brought out the reddest strands of Wanda's hair. Bob couldn't remember ever being more beautiful. He flew his fuzzy honeybee over his wife and engulfed both his wife and daughter in a long, tight hug. "I love you, I love you, I love you," he declared while Cindy said, "Buzz, buzz." And Wanda said, "What's going on?" Bob didn't answer her. He just squeezed. "Be skish," Cindy said. "Ow." Bob released them. He looked at their gorgeous faces, flushed and smiling. Immediately, Wanda's smile was tentative. It was a mix of what appeared to be confusion, and he was smiling. "Daddy pee-pee," Sandy said. Bob set his daughter down. Wanda took Cindy's hand and led her to the bathroom. The second Wanda and Cindy were in the bathroom, Bob looked around the cabin, checking his blood cleanup. He didn't clean anything he missed, and what he'd do in the paper towels he used. He checked his pockets, felt them there, but he didn't pull them up because Aaron and Tyler were coming down the ladder. Putting Ralph out of his mind, Bob hugged his boys again. They tolerated the hugs for a few seconds until Tyler announced, "I'm hungry." The bathroom door opened. Cindy, her arms straight out of her sides, started buzzing again. Bob reached out and grabbed Wanda by the hand and pulled her close. "It's a beautiful day and we're together, and we have lots to do today," he said, spinning Wanda into a dance around the cabin. Wanda laughed. "Who are you and what have you done with my husband?" Then she gave up and wilded him to sweep her up into a dance. Heading to breakfast at the main lodge, Cindy skipped ahead, but Bob held tight to Wanda's hand. The sun was already ascending into a brilliant blue sky. The evergreens were bright green in the morning light, and they seemed to reaching around the sky, as if in celebration of a new day. Chickadees played in the forest undergrowth. Their free bee calls joined in the few chuck cries of the western bluebirds Bob could see flitting through the higher tree branches. A woodpecker started a rat-a-tat from a tree just out of view, and on a low-hanging branch near a trail, a chipmunk chattered, "Spick, spick, spick," as it fluffed its tail. Bob felt like he and everything around him was going cartooned. It all felt too colorful, too cheerful, too, well, cartoony. After everything had happened the night before, he wouldn't have been surprised if the families around had broken into song. Campatino was hoping his morning as everything was heading to the lodge for breakfast. Kids were running and playing as they went. Aaron and Tyler raced off to join some new friends in a game that involved a lot of shouting. Today, the activity didn't bother Bob. He was still riding his high off of the profound relief. "I take it you decided this place isn't so bad?" Wanda asked. Bob grinned at her. "There are worse places. Much worse," Bob thought 15 minutes later as he sat at the table with his family, eating his way through some of the thickest, tastiest pancakes he ever known. "Wow, what is in these?" he asked one of the camp employees who came by to top off his coffee. The perky gray-haired woman leaned over and whispered, "The secret is cinnamon and vanilla, but don't tell anyone I told you." She grinned and bustled off. Breakfast was being served in the main dining room, which, like the main lobby of the lodge, had vaulted log ceiling and golden log walls. Bob appreciated that the room was filled with dozens of round tables, so families could eat together instead of being forced to join everyone else's long communal tables. The only long table was the one in front of the room, and it seemed to be reversed for the Campatina staff. Bob took another bite and watched his kids eat. Aaron and Tyler were stuffing as many pancakes in as they could, acting like they never had another chance to eat. ever. Cindy had both pancake and syrup mixed adorably all over her face. Around them, dozens of conversations filled the room, with a lively hum and blend with the clinks and clatters of silverware and stoneware. The air was sweet, with the aroma of maple and butter. Excuse me, a loud tink-tink-tink of the spoon hitting the side of the glass lowered the decibel level of the room far away. Can I have your attention, everyone? Bob and his family, and most of the other diners, looked toward the staff table. In the middle of it, a tall, tanned man with a beard waved to everyone. Over here, he called. Bob recognized him from the picnic and the campfire the night before. Talking died down. A few more rustling, murmuring gave way to silence. Everyone looked at the man. Remember me from last night? I'm Even, the owner of Campantina. I'm your host. I hope everyone had a good first night. Bob tensed up and kept a smile on his face. Most everyone else cheered. Good, Evan said. Okay, for your announcements. Bob prepared to zone out. He figured Wanda would let him know whenever he needed to know. First, Even said, regarding the bunny calls. Every cell in Bob's body went on high alert. He turned. My apologies to those who signed up for the bunny call, Even said. They should apologize, Bob thought. The bunny calls couldn't be done this morning because the counselor who usually does bunny calls overslept. Rafa wasn't able to make his rounds today. Bob stared at Evan. These are really great pancakes, Wanda said. Aren't they, Bob? Dun dun dun! They were never done, which means the person who did it was a moidewa. Spooky! But, hey, them's the cards played. Next time we get to read the story in the flesh. Sounds interesting. Yeah, next time shouldn't be that hard either. Let me see what we're dealing with here. Do. Hello there. I mean, we can do 78 to 80, or we can do 78 to 10. I guess 100. And you know what? Let's just do it to 101. So the next time is going to be 101 to 120, but it's so close to being done. So let's do it 70, because it's basically 76. The next page is 77, but it's empty. 78 is empty. 79 says in the flesh. 80 is the page that starts with You're So Lucky. So 80, 81, 82. Yeah, so next time we're going to do 81 to 101, which is the first time we move this. Woo! And then next time we're going to do 101 to, I guess, 129. So we'll kind of we'll do the next thing in 2 pages, I guess. Yeah. That sounds good. But, yeah. I hope you guys have a true fantastic, wonderful day. People like Beef Fishy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time for the really, 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 really long read. Bye-bye. Well, actually, it's only 20 pages. Bye-bye.